It's week 23 of 2018. We've got an update on the VPN filter malware affecting routers around the world. We also have some updates from the WWDC conference at Apple to see if our predictions came true. That and a lot more news is coming up on the Technado, starting right now. Hello and welcome to the Technado. I am your host, Peter Van Rysdam, and I am joined by somebody other than Don.
That's right.
Don is down in Disney enjoying the heat and lines. And
he's taking a break. We told him he got a break when he got the job, but since he's the co-founder, he keeps coming back.
Yeah, it's weird. So we've got Wes Bryan joining us today. Wes, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Peter, for having me here. It's great as always.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
And those of you who are regulars here on the podcast know Wes, of course, joined us a couple weeks ago. We talked about Intel chips, and we've actually got some Intel chip news to get to here and some ARM stuff. So that'll be good to get your perspective on that. Don doesn't know what he's talking about with that stuff. So always good to have you. And as promised, we've got some updates on some stories from previous weeks. And so let's jump right in with the first one here. We talked a little bit about the malicious, the malware things that were hitting different routers, and basically the FBI asking you to go ahead and reboot, and that should solve the problem. Everything's going to be fine. Turns out it's not quite fine. So our first article here is from Tom's Guide, and it says Russian router malware just got much worse. What to do? So it turns out that they're now, I guess, able to actually do some man-in-the-middle stuff with these, and it's worse than we thought originally. So, Wes, any insight here as to why this has gotten worse, basically?
Yeah, basically what they've kind of found out is that, the FBI intervened in the first rendition of this virus, the VPN filter botnet, and it had some infrastructure servers that it needed to communicate with. And while the FBI intervened and they, tried to neutralize that botnet, it is believed that the Russian military, or the ATP, Advanced Persistent Threat, if you will, they have the money, are assembling a new bot. So I don't know if this is a robot, but it is the successor to this, and it's really nasty too. It seems too that it was in older firmware platforms, so that if you were up to date on the newest platforms, then really one of the things that you would see is that if you just kept your firmware up to date, you wouldn't have to worry about it. Another problem about this VPN filter botnet is the fact that it's persistent, if you will, boot persistent. And if you think about your routers, you got a home router, I'm sure, at your house, because I know you're connected to the internet. How often do you reboot it? Or do you let Mother Nature reboot it for you?
Yeah,
that's what happens.
Yeah, every time it rains.
That's right.
Yeah, no, pretty much just when I have to, if I have a connectivity issue.
Sure, and I'm picking on Peter because we're Florida here. We're the lightning capital of the world for sure. Well, with that, if you think about it, and it's also IoT devices too. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the routers. I mean, some of the routers that we do see, a lot of the popular brands and stuff, things like Linksys, Microtix, Netgear, TP-Link, QNAP. We happen to know a company that actually used a QNAP for once in a while.
Yeah.
And again, there's a lot of routers out there. In fact, I come to find out my router was susceptible to this.
Really?
It was actually in the model list. So it is one of those things that it does have a pretty big infrastructure. It has a command and control aspect of it. And again, that's one of the things that the FBI kind of intervened on. And now we're getting the next rendition of it.
Yeah, and we've got a list here in that article from Tom's Guide, and it goes down, specific models from Asus, D-Link, Huawei, Linksys, Microtix. The list goes on. Netgear, QNAP, TP-Link, Ubiquiti, ZTE. So, there's definely a lot of different people.
I want you to focus on the very first model in the list.
The Asus RT AC66U?
I was going to say, does it? This is a list that I don't want to be number one on, but unfortunately I am. So that was my model right there. So this a little scary here, but I'd like you to focus on something kind of interesting. Is just under where it says more routers, security stinks, and there's the second paragraph in there.
Terrible menu on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So if you look at the second paragraph there, it does tell you. It says the malware seems to infect only devices that are known to have had security flaws, right? And look at the sentence right after the comma, all right? All of which have fixes available. So this is one of those things that, like we always say here, we stress in like our security episodes, check them out if you haven't seen them, that stay up to date, patch your systems, right? Check to see if you have firmware. I know you have firmware. We know that. I'm glad
but the new
I was going to say, you're glad you brought me in here.
Yeah.
Your device has firmware, but check to see what version of the firmware is. Check out on the vendor's websites to make sure that the firmware versions match. And if they don't, do your updates, and hopefully that will patch it. But again, at the end of that paragraph, it says, unfortunately, there's no way of knowing. So don't quite take your tinfoil hat off yet.
Yeah, and we had another article here about it from Bleeping Computer that kind of lists those same issues and same manufacturers. But I like this one because it had this kind of cool visual that shows how this attack really works and how the man in the middle kind of thing works, and for someone like me, helps me understand.
Well, sure,
what's
absolutely.
Going on
this
here.
is kind of like the executive summary anyways, and it's a good way. It doesn't matter if you have technical background or don't. It is great to see the flowchart, and in fact, a lot of your the people that are going to research this have to put these together so they know what's going on too. But you see, there's many stages here, and the server part aspect of this is what they they kind of got a hold of and stuff, and then again, command and control. It's always these botnets, they're made right to basically to infect as many computers as they can so that they can get that remote control exploitation. Now, we've seen things like IoT botnets in the past. In fact, I think we had one last year, or somewhere in the middle of last year or so, and again, time slips by me so quick, where the entire northeastern of the United States, the DNS servers went down because there was some kind of supply chain attack. So again, you have to think about these devices. If it's affecting IoT, a lot of these devices, you can have entire sensor nets that are dedicated to IoT, so it becomes even more problematic because a lot of times these systems are left. There could be embedded systems, and they're forgotten about, right? Mm-hmm. And they a lot of times they're not rebooted. So a lot of moving pieces here. So this certainly wasn't just some script kiddie, just pulling down a piece of code that somebody else wrote and putting it into play. That you could see a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah, I know it was kind of originally attributed to Russia as an attack on some routers in the Ukraine, but it's definitely something that's affecting a lot more people than that. So interesting to keep an eye on. Another thing we wanted to keep an eye on this week, I guess, the beginning of this week was the Apple Worldwide Developer Conference, and last week Don and I took a little bit of time to make some predictions on what we expected to see. We had talk about, are they going to just merge iOS and OS, and that's kind of wishful thinking on a lot of people's part,
yeah,
I think.
Sure.
My big prediction was that they were going to have a laptop that you stuck a phone down in, and that became the processor for it, because I know that is just Don's biggest fantasy. Every day he dreams about a day where his computer can be his phone and it's all in one. But unfortunately, that didn't happen as well. But as a lot of people predicted, it was more about software than hardware.
Yes, definitely.
And the first thing that we have is from Slashdot here. We have kind of an article that goes through a couple of things that were released, but the first being iOS 12. So some big updates coming to the phones. Anything stand out to you as?
Some of the things in the article are actually really great. Absolutely, they say apps will launch about 40% faster than they did. Again, you can slide to take a photo up to about 70% faster than what iOS 11 offers. And they're also using more of the augmented reality in it. And this is where they're getting this something that they feel, and it even says in the article that they've claimed to invent this, is the personalized memojis. I don't even know if you say that. Mm-hmm. There are so many different types now where it's basically like an animated, emoji.
And they had those animojis come out with when they launched the iPhone X, but now this is actually letting you. It's almost like the Wii characters you created on Nintendo, where you can kind of create that image that looks like you, like a Bitmoji that a lot of people are using, but actually animate that then with different things, which is pretty cool. But my big question coming out of seeing the iOS 12 announcement is, what the heck are we going to do with 30 some odd people on a FaceTime call?
Yeah, it's a little crazy, right?
It's hard enough with two.
Exactly. I have had 5 or 6 people on a FaceTime when our cousins and my kids and the cousins are all talking together.
Yeah.
And if you remember going back to the days of the speakerphones when being on a conference call, and before you know it, you can't get anything done. So I don't know how beneficial that is. They also have things like groups notifications that they claim that they've invented. It also says it in the article, but if you'll read it a little bit closer, it says even though they claim to invent it, Android's been doing this for over 8 years now. Again, things like the do not disturb, you'll have more control over things like notifications, they say, and the do not disturb area of that. I don't know how applicable that is. I guess it's all about putting you back into control and telling you, well, at the same time, how you should control it.
And as I know you're a parent as well, there were a lot of things in there about parental controls in terms of setting times, not just for screen time in general, but certain apps to say you've got 1 hour on Instagram today, or 2 hours watching YouTube, or things like that. So you're actually able to set that based on apps, and it's pretty cool. It gives you a little warning. You've got 5 minutes left. Basically, yeah. Finish all your comments, kids. It's almost time for bed. So I'm kind of excited about something like that. My daughter's a little young to have her own phone yet, but when she does, that'll be something cool to see.
Oh, most definitely. In fact, I got a little story about that. Just had to deal with it this week. My son's going into middle school. God help us all, scaring me a little bit on this one, but we decided that we would get him a phone just so when he's out. And he decided to take all his friends that he knew which really don't know each other and group them together. So we essentially had to say, you just shared phone numbers of people that they don't know all in the same group. So I would, and that's Android. Yeah. So I'm not going to have the benefit of those features.
True. Yeah.
Pulling me back over to the Apple world, Peter.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm doing what I can to help.
There we go.
Well, next up, the big other announcement from this event was the announcement of Mac OS 10.14, better known as Mojave. And, what have we all been waiting for in our operating system but dark mode?
Oh, my gosh, you got to have it, right?
That's amazing. And the funny thing is, that's really what they led with in the announcement. If you watched it, they just ran right with, and look at this, you can basically make the screen black background with light text as opposed to what you're normally seeing, white with
the space gray. It's space gray. I don't know why that makes it better. Maybe because it's from space or something. But you know how Apple's beloved space gray has always been their theme. So
I'm sure there's other stuff though that jumped out to you from Mojave. So what interests you?
Desktop stacks they talk about. That's one of the ones that we do see. Again, the feature that basically just collects specific files, puts them into a single pile, and then if you just click on that pile, it actually separates them out. So we've kind of seen something like that. Like I know you have Mac, I have Mac. So if you think about your documents download, and when you hover over it, kind of separates everything out, and you can kind of see what's in the list. You let it go, it kind of minimizes back on itself. So that I don't know how much productivity that'll handle, but for those people, and I'm sure I don't know if you are one of those people. If you are, I apologize ahead of time. You've probably seen those people that have 183 icons on their desktop.
Yeah,
I don't know how. Some of you, if that's fine, don't mean to offend you. If you can keep track of that, I'm having a trouble finding the trash bin or the recycle bin on a single icon. So it might enhance the productivity. Grouping those together make you a little bit faster. But that's kind of really cool.
Yeah, let's jump over to the Macworld article, actually, because that's got some more imagery so we can actually see some of the things we're talking about. For those of you that are watching the video version, if you're listening on audio, you'll have to trust our amazing descriptions.
That's right.
Mojave. So, of course, we've got the Mojave Desert as the background. And one of the cool things is you can actually set it that throughout the day, the photo background will kind of change with the time of day. So when it gets to nighttime, it's a nighttime shot, and it does all that automatically. So that's kind of cool. Again, one of those features that doesn't help you with productivity at all, but just a fun feature. Here's dark mode that we talked about. You can kind of see the difference between light and dark. I wonder, is this something that would save power at all?
Maybe.
Like the brightness of your desktop?
I don't really know. But for those of you that like the different type of contrast, maybe it'll help you see a little bit better. I'm not sure.
Well, if you're used to photo editing tools like Adobe things and Photoshop.
That's one of the first things I was thinking.
That's what it looks like. Yeah. So you definitely might be more comfortable with that. There's desktop stacks that you talked about. So really help you clean up the desktop if you have a lot of things there that you're dealing with.
Sure. I like this too. No, that's not happening.
No.
But what that's kind of addressing is the merger of iOS and Mac OS together, and that's what they're saying no to. No, that's not happening. Yeah. But apparently, they also mentioned that there is going to be a compromise. Some of the popular iOS apps will be like Apple News, voice memos, home stocks. They'll make their way essentially over to the Mac environment, and I don't think that's anything that's uncommon. I don't think that's anything that's specific to Apple. Mm-hmm. I know you've seen this as well, Peter, doing media and stuff like that, creative media and stuff where, Microsoft has gone that way. They want the all interfaces in one, so it doesn't matter where you're at. And, it doesn't matter if you're on Xbox Live, if you're on your Microsoft account, if you're in the Azure Cloud interface, and now if you're in Windows interface, you're really seeing those similarities. So I don't know. I don't know if Apple's going to go that way, but they've definitely started to port some of those over to iOS, from iOS to your Mac OS. And if you're like me, at one time I had a lot of Apple devices. I had like 4 iPads. I had the Mac, the Mac as well. And that it'd be nice if you are always on your iPad Pro now to have some of the things that are centric to just the iPad, or your iPhone as well, to kind of be able to cross-platform those.
Yeah, and one of the other cool things I remember seeing in the demo, I don't see it here, but was a screen recording function that they had that, you can do that now with plugins and different apps, but to have that built in is pretty cool as well. A lot of times we're doing tutorials or things where we want to show off what we're sharing on the screen, so that's a cool way to do it.
They do mention a little bit about the screenshot type thing where you can actually annotate screenshots. Yeah, that's one of the newer features, and I'm not sure exactly how beneficial that will be, but it could be, it just gives you the option to mark it up.
Screenshots, yeah. And they showed how you can actually kind of fire up your camera on your phone to take a shot and dump that right into a document you're working on. So seeing kind of some of that coming together is a pretty cool thing there as well.
And there's the obvious things or the common things that just go in any kind of OS update, not vendor specific by any means, but security updates. And I'm sure you've probably talked about this many times, on the podcast that Apple's definitely been focused on privacy lately, considering what they've been dealing with. So that's one of the things that they're trying to do is we have such a holistic nature of all these big companies, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, that they're trying to keep some of the social media, or not social media, but social networks, I guess social media networks, from tracking what you're doing, because everything's so intertwined,
Yeah, a lot of people were mentioning that some of what they were saying seemed like shots at Facebook.
Yeah,
they're the ones in the news for the bad stuff right now.
That's right. How can we disassociate as quick as possible?
And they basically made a talk about how they'll be able to track you, but not as an individual person, but as just this kind of Mac. And so a little bit more anonymity in terms of what other people are able to see about who you are, which is cool. Here's that continuity camera. Found that spot that I talked about. So it'll actually bring up the camera on your phone, let you scan a document or take a picture, throw that right in the software you're using. So you can.
That's a great feature.
Cool. Yeah.
And the one that you were talking about, the moving backgrounds, that's the next one in the list. Okay. That's the dynamic desktop there. And again, they say it's more of a cosmetic thing, but still cool nonetheless.
But the last one, that's something that encourages people to, hey, I have a Mac, but I use an Android phone. Well, maybe now there's a reason to get an iPhone. So definitely they want to cross promote there. Redesigned App Store. Definitely. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But there were some things that weren't mentioned in the keynote that. Actually, let me skip an article and we'll go to the Ars Technica one first and talk about some of the things that didn't get mentioned, but were still features that are new and maybe just not as exciting to the general public. OpenGL and OpenCL, so that's something that's new in Mojave iOS 12. Ending older Mac support, so you've got some machines that will be supported and others that will not make the cut. So obviously that's something they don't really want to talk about in the keynote of, hey, by the way, your device won't work on this.
That's right. And by the way, we're closing everything off. And I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit later on the opposite approach by another big company. But it seems like, they're just because, like the article says, software developers, they like open source. They like that open source collaboration and within a community. And that could be a big deal. But, Apple's always really been strict on their applications and how they control their applications and their software. And you could be on either side of that debate, open source versus proprietary. But, and I kind of see it both ways. I'm been a Windows guy for a long time, and we know Windows is proprietary, but I don't really have a problem with Apple having, locking everything down, because it kind of ensures consistency. Well, some people will say, have you owned a Mac lately or over the course of years? But, they're really focused on controlling everything, where Microsoft tries to make an operating system that supports 1,000 different devices. Obviously, you're going to run into some inconsistencies with trying to do that, where Apple's the opposite side. We got a handful of stuff that we develop, and we only support that. So, again, both sides of the tracks, but it does seem like they're trying to close source more than open source.
And speaking of shutting things down, disabling USB access is one of the other things that was not really talked about in the keynote, but it is something that's happening where I think it's after an hour, you have to use your passcode to allow a connected device to continue to connect through USB. So that's something that I think it was like a day or a week or something before, and it's going to make it harder for people that forensics to find things on your phone, or potentially people that have stolen your device to access it.
It really is, because in the past, take their FireWire platform, and I know we get technical here, IEEE 1394, but take FireWire, because largely it was Apple that was promoting it, right? FireWire had a pretty bad exploit that did require local physical access to the computer, but basically FireWire in the architecture has direct memory access. So when you plug that device in, you can bypass the operating system, and you have DMA direct memory access, which means that if you can put a piece of code on a FireWire device and plug it into the Mac, essentially you could slipstream it. Somebody in the know could slipstream it into memory, and then they could execute that exploit right there. So I think this is kind of cool in the fact that what they're saying is, hey, it's just like your computer. After a bit, if you walk away, it locks up on you, and you got to put the password back. Well, the same thing with the ports, because it doesn't prevent, but it's definitely a layered defense. First layer of defense of your house, what do? You lock the front door, right? So we just can't open the door. So I think it's a great thing.
It's kind of like the hotel door that locks behind you automatically.
That's right, absolutely.
They're taking that guessing game out of it for you, and making you use your key again.
Yep.
And a few other things, multiple faces and Face IDs. So now you can, put your wife or your kid to have their face be able to log in as well, which I don't know if I'm going to do that. Let them buy everything now, but so a lot of new things, coming out of not just the keynote, but as people are getting into the beta now and looking under the hood a little bit. But I want to go back to a kind of funny story here, and both Wes and I remember this now that we brought up. I wouldn't have thought of it if I hadn't seen this article, though, because I did not remember the name. But Apple's Mac OS Mojave shares the name with a fictitious Microsoft Windows release. This is on AppleInsider.com. And you may remember back when Vista first came out for Microsoft, it was getting a lot of bad reviews, and there was just a lot of negativity around it. And as such, you had people that had never used the platform, never seen it, and just said, oh, yeah, that's terrible, because that's what they've heard. And so Microsoft had a campaign, where if you scroll down here, this is kind of a screenshot from it, where they basically brought people into a focus group and said, okay, well, here's Vista, and next to it, here's Mojave, and try them both and tell us which one you like better. And everyone across the board said, oh, I love Mojave better. And all it was Vista with a different skin on it.
Placebo.
Yeah, and then they told people at the end, well, that's actually just Vista that you used that you hadn't used before, and isn't as terrible as you thought. So I think it's kind of a funny choice that I wonder if they were aware of that.
That was one of the first client certifications I ever got with Microsoft, was a Windows Vista certification. And that's one of the big things. I mean, going back, you figure how much of a resource hog it is, but you'd wonder why exactly Apple would use a code name, if you will, that reminds us of such an operating system we'd really like to forget.
Well, Mojave was universally loved.
It was,
by these
of
people
course.
In the focus group, so maybe that's what they're taking advantage of. But I know they were going down the list of basically, different landmarks in California, right? All
That's
California.
right. Absolutely.
So,
Yep.
yeah. The Mojave
Well, at
Desert
first
there.
it was the large cats, right?
Yeah.
We did large cats, and then I could never figure out why they went to things like Sierra, Yosemite. I'm like, well, maybe they like mountains or something.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody's a mountain
They're in
climber.
Mountain View. Yeah.
That's right. And then to find out, like you said, that it's actually famous landmarks in California. But if you'll scroll down, I love the Twitter, or tweet, if you will, that's right in the middle of the screen here.
Oh, this one. Yeah.
Yeah, it says, what if people, or what if we showed people Vista, but we told them it was a new operating system called Mojave? In 2018, they say, what if we showed a Mac OS High Sierra, but we told them it was a new operating system called Mojave?
Well, if this one actually works,
Right.
then I'm all on board. But
I call Vista the modern. It's the ME for this generation, right? It's the mistake edition.
ME. Yeah, I thought you were saying EMMY ME, but yeah, Windows ME Millennial Edition?
Millennial Edition.
Not Millennial.
We know what he's got on the brain right now.
Yeah. Oh, millennials.
Ah, that's right.
All right. Well, let's jump ahead because apparently, come to find out that Apple wasn't the only one making announcements. And we talked about how most of the announcements from the keynote were software based as opposed to hardware. There were some things going on in the world of hardware, and Asus was at the front of that. So this article on Tom's Hardware, Asus's new ZenBook Pro have a screen in the touchpad. So hey, we're getting closer to Don's dream of being able to drop the phone in. We've talked about it. If you do that, is the phone then just your
That's
your
right.
mouse
He actually had one of those at one time.
Yeah,
remember the pad phone?
He's got a few of them.
And they were always horrible. So
he's going to try every single one of them to see if it's any good.
But this is really interesting because if you think about it, Asus has definitely kind of done their own unique spin on it. But is this Asus's answer to Mac's Touch Bar?
Yeah, I think so. But that makes a lot more sense because your hand is already in that position as opposed to having to reach up. But then are you going to make mistakes like I always accidentally hit this Siri button up here when I'm going for the delete key the touch bar. So what am I going to be hitting on this Asus touchpad?
Or you're in the middle of a lab demonstration in one of our videos and you hit the power button.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
that's
not?
just because I got fat fingers. But yeah, so this thing's got some pretty big specs, pretty nice specs on it. I mean, it's not a cheap one by any means. We're talking $2,200, $2,300. And they do make, and you can read down on the bottom of the article, they do make one that doesn't have the that touchpad display pad, if you will, and it's a little cheaper, $1,700. So they take off about $500 for that. But nice specs. It can the quick launcher, number pad, media player, app specific toolbars. Which they'll also mention though that like just with any new product. There's always going to be quirks. They don't get it just right on the first release. So they say that there are some app-specific toolbars for this thing. Mm-hmm. But I'd like to look, if it's okay, I'd like to look at, so it's 5.5-inch, they say FHD, so they're going to feed you some alphabets, so just full high definition, nothing big on that. But it's supporting more for Microsoft's gestures. Gestures, do you remember, speaking of Vista, and not long here, do you remember when the tablet PCs, now I'm not talking about what we have today, these were just swivel screens that would come back.
Yeah.
Well, those gestures actually started there back in, going back to tablet mode, or tablet XP that they had, but they started to kind of revolutionize those with Vista, but they were still quirky in Vista. So it'll be interesting to see how they've matured. But they got precision drivers in Windows 10, and it's supporting those Windows 10 gestures, if you will. What else do we have that we've seen as well? So they were talking about some of the widgets. If you have some of the widgets on your screen and you're using that feature, that it's a little quirky. It'll go from working to not working. So you might want to just use it as a trackpad.
Yeah, it's interesting because it wasn't what this was or how Windows was designed to be used necessarily. So maybe if Microsoft adopts some of this and puts it out in their Surface line, then they'll start to kind of bake it into some of the applications. So and Windows itself, so you can pull up the charms bar or things like that. But wanted to show another one here. That's not actually not the only thing that Asus unveiled. This one is kind of shown as a concept, like a concept car. You would see it at an auto show, but something they say they actually will build. It's Project Precog, which I think is a reference to Minority Report. It's a dual-screen laptop with built-in AI. So, I mean, just visually, this thing is pretty neat. instead of having a traditional keyboard, you have a second screen essentially here. Bring that up. That is a touch screen, so it has those keys, and then you've got other things you can bring down onto that side. They even show up here in this video. You can see where they've taken it and turned it on its side, and you actually have then a landscape mode monitor essentially that you're able to take advantage of. So pretty cool when you think about. I mean, we've talked about this kind of thing before, where we're saying, why didn't the touch bar in the Mac, wasn't that just a whole iPad Pro?
Sure.
That you're able, because it's the same back end and hardware running it. So why aren't you just able to do that? I'm interested to see how easy it is to actually type on something like this without that tactile, feeling the keys, and can you do it without looking the whole time and hunting and pecking?
Yeah, that's the adaptive part. You can see in that presentation at the back, they talk about adaptive input, right? That's based all on that AI that we talk about, the big buzzword now, artificial intelligence, machine learning, things like cognitive services and stuff. And it's supposed to, the moment you hover your hands over it, it knows that they're there, and it shows you that soft keyboard, right? The digital keyboard there, and that we see at the top of the screen. So it's supposed to recognize that your hands are there, and the virtual keyboard should appear the moment you kind of hover your fingers over the screen that you intend to type on. So,
and what's funny is in that photo too, you've actually got the little line under F and J, which are the bumps you have on a physical keyboard that let you know where to rest your hand, but they went ahead and still put those in visually. So
I guess that's good, huh? I don't know how you feel that. Maybe there's a little vibration or something. I don't know.
Well, Don had mentioned before a patent he was familiar with for a type of glass that can actually do something where it puts off a feeling basically of a texture. So
interesting. So you make it feel like it's a tactile board.
Yeah, and
that's cool.
If that comes around, that'll be pretty exciting to see. But this is a cool machine that they say you can put it up in tent mode, and you can play Battleship with the person next to you. So
perfect, man. Exciting. I needed a good $1,200 or $2,200 way to play Battleship.
Yeah, the old ways just wasn't doing it for me. But very cool. And
this is really cool, though. Joking aside, I'd like to see this come to market and see what, because portability, ease of use. If they can combine those two things, I mean, that's the mobile market for you.
Yeah, you could have some fun with a device like that. Another announcement here on Tom's hardware. ARM's Cortex A76 could be the first true challenger to x86 chips on laptops. So, Wes, I know very little about chips, and you're the chip guy here. So, what are we talking about? What's an A76?
All right. Well, the Cortex, any ARM-based processor. We're talking about the advanced RISC machines, advanced RISC computing, the reduced instruction set computing. Essentially, what that long, drawn-out acronym means. Simplify it. All right. You get your CPU performance. You get low power consumption, so which means extended battery life, low thermal, heat, right? Lower heat and stuff. But in the past, ARM has always been, hey, that's what we're going to put in our phones, right? Our Snapdragons, right? That we're going to put in our phones. The A processors, I think they were called A Cortex processors for the iPads as well. But they've never really been up to the standards of a traditional x86 type processor, whether it be a 32-bit or 64-bit. Those processors always seemed, when it come to raw power, to outperform. Well, this one they're bragging. They said that this CPU is getting a 20% performance gain every year without compromising the battery life. And that's opposite of what's happening with our normal CPUs. Yeah, they're getting more and more powerful. But as they get more and more powerful, they also get more and more power hungry. Again, imagine having a laptop that had a processor in it that you could get the power of anything you would see in your desktops, but you get a 20-hour battery life. We don't really see that outside of things like Apple. Apple's very strict. They're very good in the MacBooks and stuff of getting long power life. Your gaming rigs, like for Republica Gamer type laptops where they're really powerful, you'd be lucky to get 6 hours. fully charged.
Yeah.
You know, so this thing again does have the potential to really challenge Intel and AMD, right?
And you're saying I could put this on my lap without third-degree burns?
You could. You wouldn't have to worry about cooking the eggs anymore. You'd have to find another way to cook eggs in the morning. But yeah, so yeah, basically. Machine modeling, you know, these models are going to run 4 times faster than on the previous ARM computers. So, and you take all of those things again with the better power or thermal management, better heat management, if you will, and longer battery life. If it truly is what they say it is, it could be something that we see that's more revolutionary. You know, the power of your normal desktop or laptop type CPUs basically in a chip that's been traditionally powering cell phones, smartphones.
Now, is this just a concept at this point, or is this something that's released and?
Honestly, honestly, I'm not sure if it's still in. No, it's its second generation. Yeah, so it's announced the second generation Cortex A76, and they've also got some GPUs that they're talking about out there, graphics processing units, if you will. And the other thing too is as we get into, and I know you again. Kind of piggybacking off of your media background, you know what the processing power is just generically, what it takes for 4K. I got to make sure 4000K, that's something new, right? 4K resolution and even 8K resolution.
Yeah.
And these ARM processors potentially have the benefit that they can take advantage of that, and you don't have to go out and spend thousands and thousands of dollars on. Well, we talked about the i9 processor, right?
Yeah.
That Intel came out with in one of the podcasts, which really it was really lackluster. There wasn't really much to it. But that's a $2,000 processor?
Wow.
Very expensive. Can you imagine being able to get something that is, I don't know, theoretically, maybe, I don't know what the price points are on these, but half the price and get all the power and the power, less power consumption?
Yeah, well, that'll be definitely something cool to watch and see when we start seeing this in more and more devices, and we'll see if that actually lives up to all the hype. We have one other chip announcement we wanted to get to. And our last in a series of 4 articles from Tom's Hardware in a row.
There we go.
Yeah, brought to you by Tom's
That's
Hardware.
Right. Thanks,
Technado.
Tom. Tom will talk to us after the show.
Yeah, they've always got good stuff. But Intel announces a 5 gigahertz Core i7 8086K, and they're giving away 8,086 processors as part of that announcement. So, yeah, we talked about an i9 chip, so this is an i7.
It's an i7, yep.
Not as good?
Well, I think this is all about nostalgia. I really do. And in fact, if you look in the middle there, you're going to see a couple of the i7 processors and when they were released. And there really isn't too much difference between the i7 87 and the 8700K and the 8086. So I think this is really more about nostalgia. This is for the person that wants to, play World of Warcraft or Crisis on the highest, graphics settings, but it looks like it's coming out of a TS-80 or a Commodore 64, right? So that's really, I really think that's what this is about. This is more about nostalgia than anything because they already got existing chips that you can see in that list that were released in October of 2017 that are performing the same way. And in fact, almost all of the specs, with the exception of a little bit higher of a turbo boost frequency, are just about the same. The base clock frequency base is just a little bit higher, 4.0 versus 3.7. So you're seeing some marginal gains. But if you go down the list after that, pretty much everything stays, I want to say everything stays the same, yeah. Die size is the same, it's still 64-bit. Manufacturing process is 14 nanometers, again, 14 nm there. And so everything really looks like the same. I really think that what this is going to be is just going to be more nostalgia, because you'll see they even mark it up as having a lot of the features of the CPUs that are already on the market right now.
And it's cool. It's 40 years to the day.
That's right.
From the original Intel 8086 chip, and when you see some of those jumps that they've made, going from 20,000 transistors to about 3 billion.
Yeah. Okay. So can the hardware geek come out in me, because I say nostalgia like it's a bad thing. I was looking at those specs too, and you look at the frequency base. Look at that, 5 to 10 megahertz, right? and now we're at gigahertz, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. 16-bit.
Yeah,
16-bit computing.
64 gigs memory support compared to 1 megabit.
At 1 megabit, yeah. So MB versus GB, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was looking at these. The memory bus speed, 4.7 megahertz. Versus well, we're in 2.9 gigahertz today.
Yeah.
So,
well, hopefully the one thing that will match the original 1978 specs there is the price.
Yes,
so that's got the question mark. So $86, that'd be nice, as opposed to you see the $359 for the more recent i7 8700K. So. That'll be
1,000 times faster than the original 8086. 1,000 times faster. I think Moore's law had something on that one.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, not to be outdone this week, Microsoft said, hey, I know you've got WWDC going on Apple, but we've got some news of our own. And this is a pretty big story. Microsoft is buying GitHub, and I was reading an article today that was kind of getting into some of the numbers. I think it was the $7 billion.
$7.5 billion.
And they said it's like 30 times GitHub revenue. So it's certainly not a purely financial decision in the sense of we're going to make all this profit by getting GitHub. But basically it's a play to go after the developers.
Yeah, I was going to say Chris Wenstath is probably sleeping easy tonight knowing that he's a billionaire.
Yeah, exactly. And so they'll have all these access to all these developers that they'll be able to, to try to move to Visual Studio and all the other tools that Microsoft has to offer to these developers. But this is the official post from the Microsoft blog. Microsoft plus GitHub equals empowering developers. And you see, the founders of, or not the founders, but the CEOs of each there. And so, this is bringing a lot. What is it? 28 million developers already using GitHub.
Yep.
Like I said, access to a lot of new developers for Microsoft.
Yeah, I even asked our in-house dev guy here, Justin. You've probably seen him before. If not, you definitely will if you take a look at DevPro. Because my first thought was, okay, so Microsoft. Historically, now let's go a little bit farther back than recent history. They've been proprietary, right? I mean, there was nothing open source about Microsoft, right? However, we've seen that change, right? Especially in recent, just a couple of years now, 3 years or more. I hate putting hard dates on these, but they've embraced the open source community, right? We've got the Linux subsystem in Windows now, where you're not running like the Syngen Win, I can't remember. Anyway, some of the other components that you could bring into Linux that were kind of like emulated, right? Mm-hmm. This is a true Linux subsystem. The other thing too is that he was like, well, it could be good, right? Because here we've got something that essentially is an open source community, right? You have 80 million, what did they say? 80 million code repositories, right? Well, they're active in that community too. I mean, Microsoft isn't just saying, hey, we didn't participate. They've got like 2 million code repositories that they've been there as well. So my first thought was what he eventually said was, will it remain an open source community? Will the developers be able to do like they do now and collaborate between each other? Will they be able to use the programming languages they want? Will they be able to use it on the platforms they want? And according to Microsoft, they say Microsoft is all in on open source, according to the article. I'm quoting the article here, and it says, we've been on a journey with open source. And he even says, I believe this is the CEO there for Microsoft, that says, don't look at the way back. Mm-hmm. Just look at the recent history, and the actions today and our actions in the future. They said the GitHub will remain an open community again, and they can work with the systems they choose, right? So again, I just think of Linux and Windows, right?
Yeah, if they bought this and then they went and changed all the rules, they would see a mass exodus. And it's funny because you mentioned Justin. I saw one of the first posts he made on Facebook was, here's some other options instead of GitHub for those of you that are jumping ship. And there will be those people that I hate Microsoft. I'm not going to work on something with them. But, I think as people see if Microsoft sticks to this and does actually keep it all open, that it's a good thing. And there's going to be more financial backing behind GitHub then, and potentially more features that will come to it as a result. So, it could definitely turn into a great thing for developers.
Definitely. And, one of the things he mentioned, too, and I wouldn't even have thought about this, is, the current CEO and the current era of Microsoft is definitely way different than the Ballmer years, which was even different than the Gates years and stuff.
Yeah.
So the reason I said he's got mixed emotions about it, he said, hey, most of the stuff I'm going to be doing today, I'm pulling down from GitHub as we speak. He said, but you got to worry about management changes. The vision is clear, and the vision of the future is defined now into the current administration at Microsoft and CEO of Microsoft. But what happens when another CEO? I mean, we can all say what ifs, but so just basically keep your ear to the ground, keep your eyes open, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, like you said, it says in the article that Microsoft is the most active organization on GitHub with more than 2,000 commits to the 85 million code repositories. So definitely, they're practicing what they preach. They're not getting something just to put another jewel in the crown there. It's definitely something that they're behind.
Sure.
Another cool Microsoft story this week, and this one is just really neat. Microsoft sinks a data center off the Scottish coast, and so they basically made a completely self-sustaining data center with
threw it in the
servers and put it in a container and putting it on the bottom of the seafloor there.
That's the GitHub servers. So we buy it, we throw it in the ocean. But this is really cool. Yeah, exactly. This is really cool.
Yeah. So what's the benefit of this?
I have no clue. Honestly, I have looked at this.
The one thing I saw was temperature. That it can regulate temperature.
If you think about
better.
it, you got a pretty good water cooling system.
Yeah, especially on the coast of Scotland.
Exactly. So I think really that is it, and they want to see what the systems do under pressure, pressurized systems. I'm sure, but I bet you that is definitely one of the big things. Cooling has got to be something, but we'll see. 12 racks. What is it? 864 servers, 27.6 petabytes of storage. 5 million movies, right? There you could put 5 million movies. So essentially we could put Peter's Plex server on there, right? It might actually...
most of it, yeah.
That's right. And the data center, too, the combined power of the data center. Again, remember that this is a research project, and it's dubbed NITIC. I don't know if that's NITIC Mass, but again, we'll see.
Yeah, and they said it could be... or they've been experimenting with this for about 5 years, and previously they sunk a data center off the Californian coast for 5 months back in 2015. But so we'll see if this one, is something they're going to keep under longer, or when they bring it back up. But I just feel bad for, for the tech that had to go down there.
I'd learn to scuba dive. I'd do it.
I assume they locked someone in there with it and dumped it. It doesn't say.
Well, I don't want to go that far now. But you are right. I really think that one of the main reasons, and it even says it here, is the energy saving because of what you mentioned, the cooling. Because in big data centers, I've never actually sat in a huge data center, seen plenty of videos on them and stuff. But if you look at what it takes to power these data centers, and then likewise what it would take to cool these centers, they have entire climate control systems. I know the Facebook data center that they did a few years back out in Utah. They were receiving 1,000 servers every single day. They had 13 generators, backup generators on them, and each one could power 700 homes for a month, one generator. So you can imagine that kind of power gives off heat. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. There's going to be, thermal management that it absolutely costs just as much, I'm sure, to power them as it does to cool them.
Sure. And maybe we'll get to a point where they can harness that heat and turn it back into energy somehow, or, even use hydropower, or, I've seen the things, I can't remember what the term is, but when they use the ocean waves to generate power. But I mean, basically you're taking a data center, you're isolating it from natural disasters in a lot of cases. I mean, obviously there are things that can still happen on the floor of the ocean, volcanoes and things like that.
I've seen the abyss.
Yeah, I've seen the abyss. It's rough. Right. It's rough down there. But if a hurricane goes by overhead, you're really not going to be phased at the bottom of the ocean there.
Sure.
So that's a pretty cool feature.
And you mentioned geography too, just where it's located, right? Why should if we are in a cooler climate, if we're in a frigid climate at that, why should we be spending all that extra money on cooling something when we can just be using what's already available to us, and we can reduce and save some money?
Yeah, they're still going to have that one, hardwire connection though. It's going to be maybe your point of failure. So that'll be interesting because I can't get DirecTV service when there's a cloud in the sky.
That's right.
Right now, so I don't think this is going to be connected by satellite.
I'm sure they're connected to some of the transatlantic cabling.
Oh, that's true.
Because we got the transatlantic cabling basically like here in Florida that comes out of Miami and spreads over across the pond over to the UK and down into Africa and stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure they're probably, if not on one, close to some kind of transatlantic cabling.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, our last story of the day that we wanted to get to here in the Technado, it's one of those feel-good stories, that really makes you comfortable with travel and things going on in the world right now. This one on Newsweek. In-flight airplanes can now be hacked from the ground, cyber expert warns. So, so that's really exciting. And this is actually something that Ruben Santa Marta,
yep,
is going to be talking about in detail at 2018 Black Hat, which is coming up in August in Las Vegas. So kind of teasing right now that he has found a way to access these systems through, what is it, SATCOM?
It's SATCOM, and he does it from the ground. It does it from a ground base station and can manipulate and cause issues or hack into the communication devices in flight.
Yeah, because all these planes flying above us right now are mostly in autopilot modes, and
that's
so
right.
They are using satellite GPS and things like that to navigate. And if you're able to kind of tap into that system, you're able to change course for all these aircraft, and that could definitely be something scary. And as we flip over to the research he first published here in 2014.
Yeah, this is a great article, and it shows you that it's not just limited to the in-flight or planes, if you will. You can actually see there's a pretty big list, and it's like you said, SATCOM. Many moving parts to that.
Yeah, so you can definitely, check out this article and the technical white paper and get some more information, or head out to Black Hat there and learn a little bit more about it. But I would say get any air travel in before August.
That's right. That's
afterwards, he'll tell a group of hackers.
That's right. And they're going to say, oh, really? We can do that. And you talk about some of the things, when you say, oh, well, what can they do, right? If you look at just even the executive summary of the document that Peter threw up there, backdoor hard-coded credentials, backdoors, basically, administrative entry points into the systems, right? Hard-coded credentials, undocumented or insecure protocols. Now, let's be fair to SATCOM. That isn't something that you just have to worry about on SATCOM. That's part of any organization that's using some kind of communication protocol over the internet. It's up to you to do your due diligence and due care to make sure that the protocols that you use are going to secure your information. So that's not anything that's specific to SATCOM by anything, but weak encryption algorithms, that's another one. Again, that can happen in any system. But some of the other things that are just not, it basically allows you to remotely take control of these devices, and there's quite a few vendors out there, but they're aerospace, maritime, military governments, emergency services, industrial like oil rigs, gas and electricity, and media. So it's kind of scary that it's not just
those are all
flights.
the big things.
The big things that we need to make the world go round,
Hopefully
go around the world, whichever way you look at
exactly.
it.
Hopefully someone from the FAA will be at this talk and taking good notes.
That's right. That's right.
Closing and locking up all those back doors.
Yeah, and then hiring Ruben at the end and saying, we need your help.
Exactly. Well, I'm sure, that he has gone through the channels to let the right people know these things.
Yeah, and that's what the hacker conferences, they're really about. There's a reason they have bug bounties. We could pay you to find it for us. We'll give you the money before somebody else does it, and it causes us to lose millions of dollars or 200 people flying over the ocean.
Yeah. All right. Well,
that's a happy note.
Hope Don's enjoying his trip.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, you could drive down.
He's in Florida, so he's okay.
If not, we know Wes is here, so
that's right.
So we're in good hands for sure. But actually, Don's going to be out next week too. He and a few others here at ITProTV are heading over to our London office, and so they'll be doing a meetup and some meetings over there. So that'll be pretty exciting. But we'll have another guest this week. Will it be Wes? Will it be someone else? We'll have to wait.
Well, I'm always
see.
available. This is fun. I love joining in, coming here and talking about the stuff. Hopefully I can give you the right answers for sure.
Yeah, well, I came into the office and you were already here, so we just said we'll run with it.
Hey, well, you know
But
what?
for those of you that did enjoy the Technado today, you probably would enjoy IT Pro's content as well. We've got hosts like Wes and Don that are sharing all kinds of great information. If you want to check it out, head over to ITPro.tv. You can use the promo code podcast30 and get 30% off your subscription for the life of your subscription. If you like the podcast, then you'll want to go ahead and subscribe, share it with your friends. For Wes, I've been Peter, and we will see you guys next week.